There is a man in Ohio who owns a 1967 Ford Mustang. He has never driven it more than 2 miles. It sits in a climate-controlled garage covered in a soft gray cloth, and he checks on it every single morning before work. His neighbors think he is obsessed. His wife thinks he is a little strange. But he believes with complete certainty that this car is going to make him rich one day. The question is he right? Or is something much deeper going on inside his mind? Today, we are going to explore one of the most fascinating psychological phenomena in the world of money and human behavior. Why do people buy cars as investments? What is happening inside the brain when someone looks at a machine made of metal, rubber, and glass and sees a financial future? And what does this behavior reveal about us as human beings? Let's start at the very beginning. When most people think about investing, they think about stocks, real estate, maybe gold. These are logical, data-driven choices. But cars are different. Cars lose value the moment they leave the dealership. On average, a new car loses about 20% of its value within the first year. That is a financial fact almost everyone knows. And yet, millions of people across the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and Europe continue to pour enormous amounts of money into vehicles they believe will grow in value. So why does this happen? The answer begins with something psychologists call the optimism bias. This is the deeply human tendency to believe that good things are more likely to happen to us than to other people. When someone buys a car as an investment, they're not thinking about the average outcome. They're thinking about the best possible outcome. They imagine the auction where their car sells for 3 times what they paid. They see the headlines about a rare Ferrari selling for $40 million, and they think, that could be me. This is not stupidity. This is the brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. The human mind is wired for hope. But optimism bias is only one piece of the puzzle. There is a famous psychological concept developed by researchers Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky called the endowment effect. In simple terms, it means that once you own something, you automatically believe it is worth more than it actually is. Studies have shown that people consistently overvalue objects they personally own compared to identical objects owned by someone else. Now apply this to a car. The moment someone drives that vehicle home or places it carefully in a private garage, it stops being just a car. It becomes their car. And in the mind of the owner, that emotional attachment quietly inflates its perceived value. They start to genuinely believe the car is worth more than the market says. And this belief can last for years, sometimes decades, without ever being seriously questioned. A researcher at Princeton University once conducted a study where participants were asked to sell items they had been randomly given. Consistently, sellers demanded prices far higher than buyers were willing to pay for the exact same objects. The owners simply felt their items were special. Cars trigger this effect more powerfully than almost any other possession because cars carry identity. And that brings us to one of the most important psychological forces at play here: identity. There's a reason luxury car brands do not advertise horsepower in their most successful campaigns. They advertise a feeling, a personality, a type of person. When someone buys a rare vintage car or a limited edition supercar, they are not just buying transportation. They're buying a version of themselves, a self that is sophisticated, successful, and different from the crowd. Psychologists who study consumer behavior have found that high-value purchases are almost never purely rational. There is always an emotional layer underneath. And for car investors, that emotional layer is often tied to self-image, legacy, and the deeply human desire to matter. Consider the story of a retired school teacher in England who spent 30 years collecting vintage British motorcycles. When asked why, he did not talk about financial returns first. He talked about how each motorcycle connected him to a specific era of history. He talked about craftsmanship. He talked about pride. The investment angle came later, almost as an afterthought. But that emotional story was the engine driving every single purchase. This is not unusual. Research published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology found that collectors across all categories, whether art, wine, vintage watches, or automobiles, consistently underestimate the emotional motivations behind their collecting behavior and overestimate the rational ones. People tell themselves they're making smart financial decisions, but the heart is usually leading the way.
There is a personality trait psychologists call sensation-seeking. People who score high in this trait are drawn to excitement, novelty, and experiences that feel alive. Studies have shown that sensation seekers are disproportionately represented among car collectors and automotive investors. The thrill of hunting for a rare vehicle, the excitement of an auction, the satisfaction of restoring something broken back to beauty. These are all powerful rewards for the sensation-seeking mind. This helps explain why car investment culture is so deeply social. There are clubs, forums, rallies, and events built entirely around this passion. For many investors, the car itself is almost secondary to the community it unlocks. Being part of a group of people who understand and appreciate what you have, that is a psychological reward that no stock portfolio can provide. But it would be dishonest to only look at the beautiful side of this behavior. There is also a psychological shadow that follows some car investors. Research on materialism, the tendency to place excessive value on possessions, has found strong links between high materialism and lower long-term life satisfaction. People who invest heavily in objects for status reasons often experience a cycle of excitement followed by emptiness, which drives them to seek the next purchase. The garage fills up, the debt quietly grows, and the promised financial returns stay just out of reach. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. The joy of any new purchase fades faster than expected, pushing the buyer to seek another hit of that same feeling. For car investors who are driven more by ego than genuine passion, this cycle can become financially and emotionally damaging. A financial advisor based in Toronto once shared an observation that is difficult to forget. She said that the clients who came to her after losing significant money in car investments almost always had one thing in common. They had never actually created a financial plan around the car. They had purchased it on feeling. They had held on to it through emotional attachment, and they had only started thinking about the numbers when the losses became impossible to ignore. This is loss aversion in action, another concept from the work of Kahneman and Tversky. People feel the pain of a financial loss approximately twice as strongly as they feel the pleasure of an equivalent gain. So car investors hold on longer than they should, waiting for a price that may never come, because selling at a loss feels psychologically unbearable. So what separates the genuine car investor from the emotionally driven buyer? Research suggests it comes down to self-awareness and strategy. True car investors study market trends, understand which makes and models have historically appreciated, maintain vehicles with obsessive discipline, and most importantly, they are honest with themselves about their motivations. They know when they are buying with the head and when the heart has taken over. The man in Ohio with his 1967 Mustang may be completely right about his car's future value. Certain classic American muscle cars have indeed delivered extraordinary returns over the past 30 years. But what makes his story compelling is the morning ritual, the quiet walk to the garage, the careful removal of the gray cloth, the few minutes he spends simply standing there, looking. That moment is not about money. That moment is about meaning. And perhaps that is the deepest psychological truth behind buying a car as an investment. Human beings are meaning-making creatures. When the stock market feels abstract and the future feels uncertain, a beautiful machine parked in your garage feels real. It feels permanent. It feels like something you can touch, protect, and pass on. Whether that feeling is financially wise is a question only time can answer, but understanding why that feeling exists, that is the beginning of true financial and emotional intelligence. If this video made you think differently about how the mind shapes financial decisions, share it with someone who loves cars, and take a moment to reflect on the possessions in your own life and ask yourself honestly, what story are they really telling about you?